everyone. We're on the back half of a very jam-packed news week. We're talking about the former president's hush money trial. We're talking about the ramping up of Trump's VP hunt and some weird stuff that happened with Kristi Noem and other folks. The war in Gaza, the wave of campus-related protests that are going on. I'm joined now by the founder of the Young Turks, Mr. Cenk Uygur. Cenk, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
No problem, Don. Good to be
There's always something going on, but this is a lot. So this is day 14, Cenk, of the former president's hush money trial. You know, on Tuesday, Stormy Daniels took the stand. Some salacious testimony from her. When they ramp back up today, they're continuing that testimony. What are you expecting from Stormy Daniels today, and from the court at large?
Yeah. What I'm curious about is Stormy Daniels getting feedback from friends and allies, and maybe even the prosecutors, to tone it down, and so I'm curious how she's going to act today as opposed to the other days. What I mean by that, and especially coming from a guy who's been told to tone it down many times, is that look, I get it that you're frustrated with Donald Trump and you hate him, and I appreciate her honesty about that. I don't think that she should have tried to cover that up. But like, the more she gets into the salacious sex details, I think the worse off it is for the prosecution. There's really no need for it. The bottom line is did he falsify business records? In order to prove that point, you only need to know whether they had an affair or not. And that is pretty much indisputable at this point, except for Donald Trump, who is still denying it maniacally.
But Cenk, isn't that stickiness in the minds of the jury? You know, wow, this guy has some behavior, that's worse than I even thought. Isn't that part of the strategy, you think, by the prosecution?
Yeah, I get it, and that's a pretty standard prosecutorial, strategy, and that's why the judge is a little bit frustrated by it, and he's trying to keep out all the things that are terrible about Donald Trump that are not pertinent to this case. But I think this case is a little bit different, Don, because it's so political, meaning that it's involves politics, not that it's necessarily the prosecution that is necessarily driven by politics, that you have to be cognizant of how the jury is going to perceive it. If it seems like they're just trying to smear Donald Trump, not related to the case, it might backfire. So to me, this is an open and shut case. Did he falsify business records? Of course he did. And they've got evidence that's indisputable, right? The guys who saying they received the payment, the guys who said what the payment was for, it clearly wasn't legal payments to Michael Cohen for other reasons. It was definitely for the hush money. So all the sex stuff to me is just a distraction, and I'm worried that it's going to bias the jury in the opposite direction and they're just trying to hurt this guy.
Well, I mean, his attorneys tried to use it as cause for a mistrial, right? That did not happen. But I'm sure on the appellate process, and they will appeal if he loses this, right? This is helpful, and I think the attorney just wanted to get that in the record. He knew that the judge wasn't going to say, "Oh, mistrial, we're going to have to redo this." I got to ask you that. I got to ask you this, Cenk. Well, do you agree with me on that before I ask you the next question?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it should be a mistrial, but I get why the judge is trying to reel her back in, and they should have brought all these cases earlier. It should have been finished by now. It drives me crazy that they waited so long to bring these cases. And like, everybody knows Donald Trump's a terrible person. And you either hate him for that or you like him for that, unfortunately. So you're not going to move anyone by proving how terrible he is in his personal and sexual relationships.
But listen, you said how slow this, it's taken too long. I don't think Alvin Bragg is slow rolling. The Supreme Court may be slow rolling. Fani Willis offered Donald Trump's attorneys the biggest opportunity to slow roll this and to delay it, because now they're going to have to rule on whether or not she can stay on as the lead on the case down in Georgia. So this may be the only one that goes to trial.
So, Don,
before the election,
I don't think he's slow rolling since he started the trial. I don't think anybody's slow rolling anything other than Judge Cannon in the
Florida
case down in Florida. So because she's trying to help Trump by delaying the case, I think that's pretty clear. But they slow rolled starting the trials. Alvin Bragg did, and most egregiously, Merrick Garland did. She waited 2.5 years to appoint a special prosecutor. If you thought the guy did a coup attempt, which I think he did, then what are you waiting 2.5 years for? Is it to put it in the middle of the campaign? I think it was a terrible, terrible decision, and a pretty political one. I think it's mainly because he wanted to protect the elites, and Trump is part of the elites. But when they realized he's running again, they panicked and then started all these cases.
Wait, you think that Merrick Garland wanted to protect Trump as an elite?
I do. And I'll tell
Wait,
you why.
what?
Yeah, I'll tell you why. Because in Washington, the groupthink is the elites are never guilty of anything. They're totally and utterly above the law. And if we prosecute Trump, or is it anybody in his administration, that might open the door to people prosecuting us. And we don't want that at all. But when they realize this monster is not going away and he's going to run against Biden, then all of a sudden they put that aside and they started the case 2.5 years into the administration, which is a disaster, because that means you might not be able to finish it before the elections. It was a
Cenk,
terrible, terrible, and I think political decision.
I understand what you're saying, but Merrick Garland not wanting to start a case on Donald Trump, I think that was just like, oh my gosh, I really just don't want to do this because it's so involved. And the guy is a former president. I don't think he was trying to protect Donald Trump or any other people.
But you just said it, Don. He's a former president. That's
Well,
an elite,
yes.
and you protect the elites. So
Well,
that and the reality is that these guys, they didn't want to prosecute Trump no matter what laws he broke. They only did it because he's running again. If he hadn't run again, he would have gotten away with all of these crimes. So I have a unique opinion in that I think Trump is definitely guilty of all this stuff. And I don't think that the trials are political, but I do think the timing is political. But it's for the most ironic reasons. And look, Don, one more piece of evidence on that. They went after the average guys on January 6th with a hammer, right? With a sledgehammer. And I don't blame them. They broke into the Capitol, they broke the law, etc. I get it, right? And I'm glad that they're having to face the consequences of their law breaking. But Peter Navarro and Eastman, his lawyer, and Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump, they're the ones who planned the coup. So how do you prosecute the January 6th guys without prosecuting those guys? So, and the January 6th trial started immediately. But for anyone who was in the elites, including Eastman, Navarro, and all Bannon and all those guys, they waited and waited and waited and waited.
Don't you think they wanted to make sure that they
elites.
had the evidence to do it? I mean, it's a tougher job when it is a tougher job, Cenk. You have to admit that when you're trying to prosecute or bring a case against a well-known person. I mean, and they maybe they wanted to make sure they had the goods on them, that they actually was a plan, and they wanted the evidence before they, I'm just
No,
no,
because
all right.
look, Merrick Garland, he didn't even look at the evidence. He appointed a special prosecutor, and then
Okay.
Jack Smith looked at the evidence and then decided to pursue a charge. So Merrick Garland was just sitting on his hands for 2.5. He's one of the worst attorney generals we've ever had. He's done almost nothing. He's totally incompetent, and I think he's deeply political. He's feeble. Just if there's a coup attempt, you prosecute it. It's
I
not
think
complicated.
people will agree with you that it took way too long. I don't disagree with that, but for the reasons I'm not sure. But let's get back to the former president who is in court now. How many times does a judge have to warn him and sanction him for violating this gag order? It has been 10 times now. I mean, Trump just can't help himself. Do you think that he'll actually end up behind bars, even if it's just for a little bit? Because the judge said, "Look, I don't want to have to do this. You're the former president. You may become president again. I don't want to have to put you in jail, but I got to do my job."
Yeah. Well, so here we go again for special rules for Donald Trump. We had a viewer on the Young Turks send in a comment the other day that said, "Look, I'm a black man, and find me one black man who's defied a judge 9, 10 different times and defied a gag order and is out on 91 indictments and doesn't get put in jail for that." And of course, everybody knows that. And it's not just about black people or white people. It's about poor and middle class people who would have had the book thrown at them by now. But Trump has this special privilege of, hey, I was the president, so I get to break any laws I like. And so, Don, there's the reason Trump is doing it is twofold, but I'm worried about the third reason that they might accidentally stumble into. So the first two reasons are the man's got congenital verbal diarrhea. He just cannot help himself. He just vomits awful comments because it's in his nature. He's just a terrible guy. Almost everything he says is a vicious attack and a personal attack on someone else. He can't contain himself. He has no discipline, and that
Well,
leads into the
Cenk,
second reason, which is
maybe the prosecution is trying to provoke him by getting the salacious stuff out from Stormy Daniels so that he can do that. Maybe that's
if
part
they
of the strategy.
if they're doing that, it is a terrible strategy for a
Okay.
reason I'm going to explain in a second. The
All right.
second reason Trump does it because he's a spoiled little child. He's a third grader. He's never grown up, and I mean, he literally posted after one of the trial dates, "Not fair." He sounded like my third grade daughter. I mean, he's such a child. But
Yeah.
Don, here's what I'm actually worried about. If he keeps defying the gag order and defying the judge over and over and over again, I'm worried that he'll stumble onto a good strategy, which is just getting a mistrial.
Yeah.
Because he has no chance of winning any of these cases. He's guilty of sin. He's guilty on every count. They never present any
How
evidence.
does he stumble into a mistrial?
So because by defying the judge so many times and getting into such a huge conflict with the judge that the judge is forced to say, okay, you've tainted the jury, you've tainted this whole process, we got to do a mistrial. I mean, think about it. If he starts attacking, I'm afraid of saying this out loud, but if he starts attacking the jurors even more so, and jurors start pulling out of the trial, you're going to get a mistrial.
Well,
And all Donald Trump cares about is delaying things.
The judge actually warned him on Tuesday, telling his attorney, listen, I don't want to embarrass your client, but I can hear him groaning. I can hear him grunting. And I don't want him to influence the jury. So make sure you stop it. And, he said he went and talked to his client. He went and talked to Donald Trump.
Yeah. So look, I'm less concerned about that. I think the media was like overhyping him, nudging his lawyer. Oh, did he get physical with his lawyer? No, he's just nudging her. And if I was charged with things that I thought I didn't do, I'd probably groan too. I'm less concerned about that than I am about him intimidating the jurors. That's a real problem.
Well, that's it. But the
His
judge said
antics
he
in
was
court are not a real
intimidating the
problem.
jurors by doing that, Cenk. He's saying, he's going, no.
No, that's okay.
You think that's distracting? Okay. Maybe it's distracting. You don't think it's intimidation. Can we talk about Gaza? Because I know that you're very passionate about that. Israel has begun its assault on Rafah, the city which has become the last refuge for many people there. I think 1.3 million Palestinians. In response to that, President Joe Biden paused weapons shipments to Israel yesterday. What do you make of that move, Cenk?
Yeah, it's a good move. I'll always take positive steps forward. At the same time, obviously, we shouldn't have just passed a bill that gives them $17 billion more to kill more innocent Palestinians. And so it's kind of a weird message to send. Here's a giant check from the American people. Green light, keep the massacres going. Oh, wait, you're letting the massacres keep going? Okay, well, then we're going to pause for a little bit. And part of it, Don, I don't understand because the articles on it are not at all clear. They're saying that we're pausing the weapons transfers for a little while, but that it's not going to affect, the Washington Post said, the $26 billion we're sending Israel.
No.
Then what's
and
the
Israel
point?
has enough weapons already that the U.S. and other allies have given them to continue.
Yeah. And Netanyahu, of course, being the arrogant ass that he is, then went out and said, I don't care what Biden does or America does. We'll stand alone if we have to. Okay, great. If you're standing alone, send back the $20 billion. Yeah. What do you mean? Give me the $20 billion and then I'll stand alone.
He said they're standing alone because Israel has the right to defend themselves.
Okay, good luck with that. But then we shouldn't send them a single dollar. What do you mean you stand alone, but give me the goddamn $20 billion? No, then you should get nothing, zero. Look, the way that these foreign countries defy us drives me nuts as an American. Saudi Arabia nearly slapped Biden in the face and he let him get away with it. And now Israel's pushing him around and personally insulting him and making fun of him. So this is the very, very least that he could do.
What would you have Biden do then? Not send the money? Is that what you're
Oh
saying?
yeah, there's no way I would have signed that bill.
Yeah.
He shouldn't have sent $1 to them, and he should end their yearly $4 billion check that they get from the American people for no reason. They have universal health care. We don't. They have paid family leave. We don't. And what are we sending them the money for? For defense? If it's for defense, I'm totally fine with it. I love Iron Dome. It protects civilians. I want to protect civilians on both sides. I think Palestinians should have Iron Dome. Of course, people are going to say that's laughable. Their lives are not worth 1% of an Israeli life. So we would never protect them. I get it. This government is deeply racist against Palestinians. But overall, we should not be sending Israel any money. It's insane. Why? They're a perfectly rich country.
Well, there was a ceasefire deal that had been negotiated by Egypt, Qatar, and the U.S. last week, and Netanyahu said, "Nope, I'm not going to do it." He rejected it, saying that a ceasefire would leave Hamas intact.
See, Don, it's actually based on the reporting, maybe even a little bit worse than that, and I think that's what might have triggered Biden to finally say, "Okay, I'm pausing the shipments," because not only was the U.S. involved in that, but the Egyptian side is saying that Israel had agreed to that ceasefire and sent it to Hamas, and then Hamas agreed, and then Israel backed out of its own deal and was like, "Oh no, then we're not doing it." So they were in essence not only lying to Egypt and Qatar, which no one cares about, but they were lying to America. The U.S. negotiators thought that Israel had already signed off on this. That's why they had sent it to Hamas. And when Hamas called their bluff, then even the American side was like, "Oh, Israel's been lying all along. They never wanted peace. They never want." And when I say Israel, I want to be clear. This current right-wing government of Israel, this extremist government of Israel, it doesn't have to be this way. Israel can replace this government, go back to sanity, go back to being among decent nations in the world, where they belong. But right now they're led by, honestly, genocidal maniacs. And Haaretz has said several of their cabinet ministers are calling for not only a genocide, arguably a Holocaust against Palestinians. This is a monstrous government, and it's going to be a stain on every politician who's ever given them $1.
Cenk, people have issue with the word genocide, and you're saying Holocaust now. I mean, do you think that's a little hyperbolic?
No, not at all. Haaretz, an Israeli newspaper, called out Smotrich, a cabinet minister in Israel, for saying that he wants a total annihilation of Palestinians. So people have to understand the difference between a genocide and a Holocaust. Genocide is attacking a particular ethnicity or religious or racial background in whole or in part. So Srebrenica was a genocide, even though only 6,000 Muslims died there. But the Serbs were clearly attacking them because they were who they were, and they killed them in whole or in part. So what Israel's doing in Gaza is almost inarguably a genocide. A Holocaust is when you try to wipe out everyone in the race. That is not what Israel's doing. But Smotrich is arguing they should. And so even Israeli papers have called him out. And besides which is indisputable. He's asked for a total annihilation of Palestinians. And Ben Gvir is a terrorist. Literally, he was convicted. He has posters of terrorists on his home walls, and he's proud of it. He says, "Why are we arresting Palestinians? Why don't we just murder them on the spot?" So these are literal genocidal maniacs that are on Israel's cabinet. And Netanyahu is not that different. He's just a tiny bit more subtle. He says from the river to the sea, which means genocide.
Yeah. Okay, Cenk, you mentioned the right-wing, far right-wing government, that your words in Israel. And that's what many young people who are on college campuses now, that's the only government from Israel that they have seen through the Netanyahu administration. Ariba Martin is an attorney who's frequently on this program and who I've worked with before. She has been saying that the narrative of outside agitators is false when it comes to these college protesters, so that it is being used by administrators to justify heavy-handed tactics such as calling police and using force against students. Do you agree with that it's been heavy-handed on the part of the universities and not the students, not the protesters?
It's almost pure propaganda. The overwhelming majority of protesters were perfectly peaceful. Tons of Jewish students within the peace protests. There's a great op-ed actually at CNN of a Yale Jewish student who explained it perfectly, and it's exactly what I'm hearing from students at UCLA and at Columbia. Sometimes they'll do Jewish prayers together within the protest. Now, that doesn't mean that every protester has been an angel. Most of them are people outside of campus in New York that did the terrible chants, etc. But those are needles in a haystack. So they found 2, 3, or 12 of those instances out of literally hundreds of thousands of protesters who were actually wonderful, decent people looking to save lives, whether they're Jewish or Palestinian. And so I love those peace protesters. And what the media did to them was one of the worst smears I have ever seen. And people like Dana Bash should be deeply embarrassed for the propaganda that they did against those poor students.
Listen, Cenk, there are people who are blocking people from going to class. The university has to conduct business. So the police have to come in. They've got to be able to conduct business as universities. And this idea of free speech, do you believe that the students' free speech rights are being taken away by the police or the campus administrator?
Yeah.
Why do you say that?
Yeah, so a couple of things, Don. So if you say, first of all, let's be clear on who they're blocking. They're blocking in the cases where they have blocked a passageway. Again, the press, in this case, 100% lying. They're not blocking just Jewish students. If they were, I would be livid. Okay, I have Jewish family members who are on campus right now. I have 2 nephews.
But Cenk, they're not supposed to be blocking any students. They're not supposed to.
I'm with you. I'm getting to that. So if you're saying, hey, listen, they're blocking a certain thing, like, for example, Hamilton Hall, that takeover, I get it. The police have to go into Hamilton Hall at Columbia and clear the building. I understand that, right? So if that's the limited case that people are making, no problem. But were there college protests, for example, at Columbia that were in the same exact place, not Hamilton Hall, but in the open public spaces before this? Yeah, there was tons of them. Did any of them ever get shut down? No. Were the peace protests here any more raucous than them? No, generally they were intensely boring, okay? And so they got shut down because the people in power do not want any protest of Israel, period. So everything else was totally and utterly manufactured here. And so, Don, here I can give you another example. Like, I'm Muslim.
Let me play this before you give me another example. I want to play this because it relates to what you're saying and it relates to freedom of speech. This is Floyd Abrams, who's one of the #1 First Amendment attorneys in the country. This is what he said. He was on News Nation. This is what he said about free speech. Watch this.
It doesn't make sense. I mean, it's not what the First Amendment deals with. First of all, First Amendment has a limitation on the government, only on the government, the Congress, New York State, California, and universities, which are state universities. Now, that said, universities do promise, and Columbia does promise, to abide by basic principles which would certainly keep them from shutting one student up because they disagreed with his views on something. But the notion that there's some sort of First Amendment violation when the police are called, where students have entered into, broken into, seized a building belonging to the university, the notion that that's protected by what, the spirit of the First Amendment? It's not. And indeed, without law, including law enforcement, there will not be any genuine protection for our freedoms as a whole.
Cenk, your response.
Yeah, so I deeply respect Floyd Abrams. He and I debated at Oxford about money and politics. He's a great lawyer, and he's largely right about most of those things. So first of all, as I said earlier, I agree on Hamilton Hall. Once you go in there, I get it. They got to clear you out at some point. Second of all, it's not a government issue. He's right. Columbia is a private university. But the distinction is, are we talking about free speech as a governmental issue, in which case I would point to the bill that the House just passed, where they basically made criticizing Israel illegal, which is deeply, deeply unconstitutional. It's one of the most unconstitutional things I've ever seen. But when Columbia does it, then we're talking about free speech as an idea, and universities are supposed to be in favor of free speech ideologically, not necessarily based on the U.S. Constitution. They're not the government. He's right about that. But as an ideology, no, Columbia is saying, no, I'm going to send in NYPD to crack your skulls and arrest you and expel you if you dare protest Israel. And that is not in line with the ideology of free speech. That's in line with Robert Kraft, and a couple of really rich donors called me and told me that I'm going to get fired unless I shut down all the protests against Israel.
This
And
is what
that's
Floyd
the
Abrams
reality.
says about that. He said public universities are allowed to engage in a sort of a self-preservation. They don't just have to sit and and not be able to do classes because of noise, and not be able to continue in an educational process, fulfilling their educational mission, because students are not playing by the rules of the game. He said the notion
Yeah.
that anything we have seen in any of the televised and nationally discussed and nationally discussed essentially assaults by students of their universities and colleges, none of that involves the suppression of the First Amendment protected activity.
Yeah. No, but he's got the facts wrong. So when he talks about Hamilton Hall, he's right. But in terms of disturbing class through the chancellor, I've never heard that. Like I said, what most of the protesters described as intensely dull for the 99% of the time. And I went to Columbia. They're not near classes. Those spaces, those big lawns in the middle, are not that close to classes to the point where you can't hear what's happening in class. That's nonsense. No, look, Don. What I was going to say earlier is Muslim Americans get insulted like this on a daily basis. It's and it never becomes a national issue. We don't get to shut down protests against us. All universities and cable news doesn't talk about us 24/7. And Muslim students get are reporting that they're getting called terrorists and Hamas supporters and every dirty name in the book, and nobody gives a damn. So this idea that like, oh my God, we're trying to protect Jewish students because they're uniquely targeted, no, people say stupid stuff on campus all the time against Jewish students, against Muslim students, against all sorts of students.
Against
And
black
no one
students, we
ever
saw
gets
at Ole
shut
Miss
down
with the
unless it's
woman.
about Israel.
We saw the woman at Ole Miss and the guys making the monkey noises and calling her names and what have you at Ole Miss.
Yeah. And look, I don't want people getting the wrong idea, because Don, you said something important the other day, a minute ago, which is for a lot of these students, they've never seen an Israel that wasn't oppressive and killing Palestinians and oppressing them in unprecedented ways, right? But a better Israel is definitely possible. Yitzhak Rabin almost made a peace deal, and if he had and he wasn't killed by an Israeli terrorist, none of this might have happened. And then we'd all love to go to Israel and go to Palestine and enjoy those two beautiful countries. But we have to, like, so the whole, like, the anti-Semitism and the tropes about how Jewish people control everything, etc., none of that is true. But it doesn't help when a couple of people, and look, I don't like Robert Kraft to begin with. I'm a Steelers fan. Okay, and I don't like his politics. I don't like anything about Robert Kraft. But my guess is he probably was genuinely concerned, whether it's just about Israel or about Israel and what he perceived to be anti-Semitic chants, and worried about the Jewish students. He's not acting in coordination with anyone else. But when he says, I will withdraw my money unless you send in the cops, and then they send in the cops, that looks terrible. Don't do that, because you're giving the students and everyone else a misleading impression of what happens in the world and what happens in this country. And the House bill was just atrocious, saying that we as Americans are not allowed to criticize Israel. It's illegal. That's insanity.
Yeah, I'm not. Listen, I should probably know more details about the House bill, but that's part of freedom of speech. That we can criticize our own country even, and we can criticize our own flag. People hate it when you burn the flag, when people burn the flag, but actually, as an American, you can burn the flag. It may not be a good look, but you can do it. But listen, I got to ask you before I let you go, if you can just yes or no. Do you think that colleges should be canceling their commencement addresses because of this?
No,
Okay.
it's really disturbing that that's what's happening.
Right. How long do you think this is? Go on.
Yeah, the only caveat I'll give to that is that USC canceled it when it turned out someone who was pro-Palestinian in their mind became the valedictorian, and all of a sudden they canceled the speech, which is horrible. But I said, what are you guys worried about? Like, because they said violence might happen. Well, I mean, she's pro-Palestinian, so are you implying that pro-Israeli families are going to attack her or cause violence? That's outrageous and silly. But it turns out not that outrageous, because pro-Israel extremists did attack UCLA students in LA, where USC is. By the way, none of them have been arrested. So this idea that they're worried about students or they're worried about violence is an obvious lie. The only people who did significant violence were the pro-Israel protesters at UCLA, and none of them have been arrested. But every one of their victims have been arrested for doing the protest.
How long do you think this is going to go on? Because school is going to be out soon, if not out in some places. Do you think this will go past the spring semester into the summer semester, which is smaller, and usually people go home? And do you think it has a possibility to go to the election and actually influence the outcome of the election?
It totally depends on Netanyahu. So
Okay.
I'm sure it'll, peter out in the summer because it's college and that's normal. But my God, if that butcher is still killing innocent Palestinians by the time September rolls around, yeah, the college protests will be back and they will be roaring. And I believe and I hope they'll be 10 times larger. How many children can Netanyahu kill before people go, enough? I don't want, they're taking money out of our checks, Don. Our hard work goes towards bombing innocent Palestinian women and children. 24,000 at a bare minimum dead already, just women and children. I mean, there was a severed head the other day because when bombs land on buildings, that's what happens to children and women and everyone
Cenk,
in the building.
I understand. Listen, I get your passion, and I know, and there is part of that. It's true. It's a casualty of war. Yes, I think that it's the consequences of a war. But yes, I believe that Israel should be more targeted. But I also believe that Israel has a right to defend itself, and I also believe that October 7th was outrageous, and there are still hostages. And what is Israel to do if the hostages are still being held and they're not returning the hostages, and they haven't gotten Hamas, and Hamas is hiding it. Hamas, I'm sure, is hiding it in Rafah.
Yeah, but Don, so I say no because did October 7th happen? Of course it did. Does Israel have a right to defend itself? Of course it does. But Israel's not defending itself anymore. There's at least 34,500 dead already overall. There's at least 10,000 buried in the rubble. There's at least 77,000 injured. How many civilians are you going to butcher while it's 6 months later while pretending you're defending yourself? No, this is collective punishment. And there's 1 million starving Palestinians. This is disgusting. It's war crimes. They destroyed 70% of the buildings in Gaza. 90% of the people are displaced. Just look at Gaza. It's the textbook definition of ethnic cleansing. This is not defending yourself. This is massive collective punishment against the Palestinian civilians who are already imprisoned and hostages of Israel. They've been hostages of Israel for 57 years. Jesus, let them go already. And in terms of getting the hostages back done, there's a peace deal that Israel apparently okayed earlier that America is definitely in favor of that would return all of the hostages. And Israel is saying no. Yeah. So there's no question they're guilty.
You're voicing the sentiment and the concern of many college students across the campus, many younger people, and even some Jewish folks. High-profile Jewish people here are concerned about the response of Israel. Not that it doesn't have the right to defend itself, but if the response has gone on too long and that is too heavy-handed. Cenk.
Yeah, and I want to just touch on that for 1 second because it's so important, Don. Yep. Look, this is not about religion, guys. This is not about Jews or Muslims or Christians. The best fighters for peace in this country are usually Jewish Americans. They've been the forefront of civil rights movement. They were in the forefront of fighting against the Muslim ban. And right now, Bernie Sanders, Jamie Raskin have been terrific on this issue, let alone many others. And Jerry Nadler on that bill that they passed trying to make it illegal to criticize Israel said, "What are we doing? Don't do this. This is not helpful. This is counterproductive. So do not make it about Jewish Americans. It has nothing to do with that. Israel is a government. Governments do things that are wrong. And there's right-wing governments, left-wing governments. This happens to be an extremist right-wing government. What Israel is doing is 100% wrong, but that has nothing to do with their religion."
Cenk Uygur, Young Turks. Watch you religiously, sir. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, Don.
Thanks for watching The Don Lemon Show. Make sure you click on the image in the top right to subscribe to my channel and the thumbnail in the bottom right to watch more content from my show. And I'll see you next time.